Budget session of the Parliament is ongoing and the economic survey has been tabled by our Union Finance Minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, in the Lok Sabha just today. So in this video, we are going to discuss the key highlights of this important document. What have been the economic trends in our country in the previous financial year? We'll discuss everything in detail. So let's talk about the economic survey of 2025-26. And before we do that, there is this new course for you. That's the Studio GS Foundation live online course. This course is going to help you cover your complete UPSC syllabus of both prelims and mains at a very affordable price of only 24,999 rupees. And you can even get a further discount on this fee if you use a coupon code, which is SALONI, all in capital letters only, and you will be able to get the maximum discount for yourself. So don't wait, admissions are open. For any more information that you need on this course, please call us at 87501, and you can also download the Drishti Learning app and enroll into this course. Now let us talk about the economic survey. What is the economic survey? So economic survey is a very important document. This document talks about the economic trends of a country in the previous financial year. Economic trends like the growth data, GDP, GVA, how did the different sectors perform, which sector did well, which sector did not so well, the employment information, the fiscal consolidation information. So all these trends, all this data is provided in the economic survey. And this is prepared by the Chief Economic Advisor of India, and this is tabled before the budget is presented in the Parliament. Budget will be presented on 1st of February, and just before that this document is presented because this document contains the trends. So these trends are going to help us identify, these policy makers will be able to identify what has been the trend of economic growth in the country and which sectors need more information, which sectors need more priority, which sectors need more work to be done in those situations. So these things will help policy makers understand the trends and come up with better allocation of funds and better policies in the sectors that need more work to be done in them. So that's why the economic survey is tabled before the budget, but it was not the case always. This is being done since 1964. Before 1964, economic survey was presented as a part of the budget itself. It was presented along with the budget. But since 1964, this is being presented before the budget. It helps the policymakers understand the current situation, financial situation of the country, and then come up with better policies and better budgeting. So this is the history of economic survey. And if we talk about the data of the economic survey of 25-26, then it talked about a global context. First and foremost, it identified the uncertainties in the situation in the global order right now. In fact, in the global risk report also, which was released just a couple of days ago, it said that the geo-economic confrontations that are ongoing in the world at the moment, they are the biggest risk for 2026. And that is what the economic survey also said. It said that the world is likely to fall under these three situations, to go under these three situations. First is a managed disorder situation. These are all probabilities. That there's a probability that the world, because of the current volatility in the situation, can go into a managed disorder situation, a 40 to 45% of probability. Managed disorder meaning there are going to be these sanctions, there are going to be these trade wars, tariff wars, but the global economy will not collapse. It will survive. That is managed disorder. Second is a disorderly multipolar world. This is the second probability. There is a probability again of 40 to 45% that the world can be divided into multiple poles. For example, there could be a US-led pole, then there could be a China-led pole, different blocks basically, because these sanctions are going to increase, the trade war, tariff war is going to increase, and it is going to become the new normal. That will be a disorderly multipolar world. Again, there is a possibility of 40 to 45%. And then the third possibility is of a systemic global shock. 10 to 20% possibility that the world will go into a systemic global shock. This is the least probable but the most dangerous. This means that the global order is going to collapse and we are going to see a financial crisis worse than the 2008 financial crisis. So the global order is going to collapse, the supply chains are going to be under severe stress, and there'll be a lot of difficulties, like multiple difficulties are going to come together. AI-led difficulties will come together, financial difficulties will happen at the same time. So multiple things will happen at the same time, and that is going to lead to a collapse, a systematic global shock. So these are the three probabilities that the world needs to prepare itself for, and India also needs to prepare itself for these three global possibilities. Now, if we talk about the data, state of the economy, how has our economy been in the previous financial year? So for the fourth consecutive year, we have been the largest or the fastest growing major economy. India has been the fastest growing major economy for the fourth consecutive year. So our real GDP growth rate is expected to be over 7%. There's a potential growth revised. So the growth rates have been revised. Earlier they were expected to be at some 6.5%. Now they're expected to grow at 7%. So there's an upward revision. And the growth, this growth that we are talking about, it is mostly domestically driven. It is mostly domestically driven by investment, infrastructure and reforms, and not basically export-led. So this growth that we are talking about is majorly because of our own domestic demands, our domestic consumption, and not majorly because of the exports. So this is the overall state of the economy for the fourth consecutive year. We have been the fastest growing major economy of the world. Now, if we talk about the inflation, so the inflation, the term that has been used in the document is tamed and anchored. So the inflation right now, like in the previous financial year also, it had been very low. If we talk about the headline inflation, the headline CPI inflation, it averaged at just 1.7% during April to December 2025. And this happened due to a moderation in the food and fuel prices. Because of this moderation, we saw the inflation rates to be very, very low, the headline CPI inflation to be very low. And then no major inflationary threat right now is there for India from crude oil and exchange rate. We know that globally also crude oil prices have been lower. There's not a major global supply shock in terms of crude oil at the moment. So there also things are under control. And then exchange rate is also something that is not going to cause a lot of inflationary pressure on us. Right now we are seeing that there is a depreciation of rupee, but it is going to help us in our exports. So the overall situation at the moment is that we're not going to suffer from huge inflationary risks from any crude oil shock or any exchange rate shock. And the headline inflation has been averaged at 1.7%. There's a lot of data, but this data is important, and more than the data, the trend is important. Then if we talk about the fiscal consolidation, so we have achieved the fiscal deficit target. In FY25, it was 4.8% of GDP. Our fiscal deficit was 4.8% of GDP. We performed better than the target, and the financial and the target that has been revised for 26 is 4.4% of GDP. So it is expected that we will achieve this target also because the government is working more and more towards fiscal consolidation. And there is a warning for states. Now this is something that we need to understand. While the union government, the central government is working more towards fiscal consolidation, and that is why we have been achieving the fiscal deficit targets. But there is a warning that has been issued by for the states, because the states, it has been seen, like the trends say, that states are relying more on free cash, on subsidies, on these transfers that are being made by the center. And the global sentiment in the market is that now the investors, they don't just look at the central government's performance in fiscal consolidation, they also look at the state government performance, the overall performance. Investors, foreign investors, look at the overall performance, and that is why it is very important for the states also to work more and more towards fiscal consolidation. All right. Next, if we talk about the cost of capital problem. So there is a cost of capital problem. Now, first of all, what is cost of capital? cost of capital means how expensive is it to borrow money in our country. So if the interest rates are high, if the RBI puts the interest rate to be high, it gets costlier for us to borrow money. So there's a cost of capital problem, but we need to understand that this problem is not of RBI alone, because RBI also has to take care of other things. What is happening in India at the moment is that there is a persistent current account deficit, right? India has a persistent current account deficit, and we rely more on foreign savings, because in India we are investing more than we are actually saving. So who is going to fill that gap? Foreign savings are going to fill our gap. And how are we going to invite foreign investors in our markets? If we offer them higher interest rates. So that is why RBI has to take care of a lot of things over here. Because of this, we have a cost of capital problem, because we have to take care of the foreign investor sentiment also. And while doing so, many a times it gets costlier for us to borrow money in at home. But we'll have to understand that this is not just an RBI problem. Again, the government also will have to work together. Then the private sectors also will have to work together in this thing. Investment sector will have to work together, and only then we'll be able to solve this cost of capital problem. Next is the performance of the external sector. So in the external sector, our service exports did their best. So the services export touched an all-time high of $387.6 billion, growing by 13.6%. So the service exports did very, very well, but at the same time, the document has cautioned us that service sector cannot be our sole driver over here. Service exports are doing great, but we need to understand that the industries, the manufacturing sector also needs to do equally good, because we cannot solely be relying on the service sector alone, on the service exports alone. And then remittances also, India remained the largest recipient of remittances globally. And our foreign exchange reserves, they also reached an all-time high in January 2026. They rose to 701.4 billion, providing import cover of about 11 months. So our foreign exchange reserves have also been very high. They have been rising, and we need to understand all these things, that we cannot be overly dependent on the service sector itself. And there are also many reasons for this increase as well, like the gold prices also increased. It was not just dollars. Because of dollars only we did not see this reserves increasing. Because the gold prices increased, this also increased. So a lot of things happened at the back end, which led to an increase in the foreign exchange reserves value also. But the document, as I mentioned, has cautioned us that we need to be careful about our industry and manufacturing sector also. So the industry GVA, this also performed good. It grew by 7%. Despite global slowdown pressures, and the manufacturing GVA also has accelerated to 7.72% and 9.13% in Q2 FY26, indicating structural recovery. So these sectors are doing good, but they need to do better. So the document has said that we need to scale up our efforts in the MSME sector. MSME sector. We need to scale it up. There has to be more skilling, more innovation in these sectors, so that we are not solely relied on the services sector. We get more and more of support from the manufacturing sector also. And then the strategic vision that the document talked about is that we need to go from Swadeshi to strategic indispensability. So it used a very important term over here. It said that we need to follow a disciplined Swadeshi approach. A disciplined Swadeshi approach. It's a 3-tier framework basically that says that right now, first of all, we'll have to acknowledge the current situation. There are so many sanctions, there are so many tariffs that are being imposed on major economies by each other. So first of all, we'll have to acknowledge that situation, and then we'll have to depend on self-reliance in the critical sectors at least. Okay, critical sectors as in our defense sector, our aerospace sector, our energy sector, our healthcare sector. critical sectors. So all these sectors, even if initially it becomes expensive for us to invest in R&D, to invest in the technology and move more towards self-reliance, we will still have to do that, because we'll have to acknowledge that the global situation is not great at the moment. It is volatile. So we'll have to follow a disciplined Swadeshi approach, where we first understand what the critical sectors are and we start investing more and more in self-reliance in those critical sectors. Then we identify which are the sectors where we can scale up and grow. Which are the sectors where we can scale up and grow, where we can export more, get in more revenue for us. And lastly, we rely more towards becoming indispensable in the global supply chain. Where can we prove our dominance? Where can we establish our dominance and become indispensable in the global market? Because again, it comes down to the three probabilities that we talked about in the first slide, that the world is moving towards certain types of disorders. We'll have to understand that there's a probability of all those things happening. So that's why we'll have to rely on self-reliance. Then we'll have to scale up and start exporting more, and because we can't just be a closed economy. And then we'll also have to prove ourselves to be indispensable in certain sectors, in certain supply chains in the global market. So that was all for this video. These were the certain trends, the certain important data that the economic survey talked about. It's a very long document. It's a hefty document, but it's a very important document. And this document is actually going to help the policymakers come up with better policies, targeted policies, and better budgeting approach. Now let us look at a practice question for prelims. With reference to the Economic Survey 2025-26, consider the following statements about disciplined Swadeshi. 1. It supports blanket import substitution across all sectors. 2. It prioritizes domestic production based on strategic urgency, feasibility, and cost effectiveness. And 3. It discourages integration with global value chains. Select the correct answer. A, 1 and 2 only. A, 2 and 3 only, B, 1, 2 and 3 only, C, 1 and 2 only, or D, 2 only. Please attempt this question and provide your answers in the comment section. And if you liked what we discussed over here, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Drishti IAS English YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.